What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. I have what might be one of the best videos I've ever made. All right, so where do I begin? George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell recently released an episode of their Weaponized podcast with a whistleblower coming out for the very first time. The man behind the famous Immaculate Constellation documents. People testified in front of Congress about it. They presented the report. There was a whole fiasco of Jeremy Corbell on this 12th page and Michael Schellenberger, this other journalist, right, talking about it.
Representative Luna just told me if I say Immaculate Constellation, I'll be on some list, maybe a FISA warrant. So come at me, bro, I guess. But
all of this stuff, right? Well, the guy behind this Immaculate Constellation document had never come out publicly before. Now, I'll put links in the description if you want to find out more about some of this other behind-the-scenes stuff that has happened since. I made lots of different videos about it, so I'll put links there if you want to dive even further. But in today's video, we're going to focus solely on this new whistleblower that's coming out and his interview that he gave, a part one interview, mind you, with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, going on camera for the first time, revealing his name, diving in deeper into what exactly is Immaculate Constellation. And there's one part in particular in this video where he says a name that they redact out of the interview. And it's quite an important name.
So everyone says that I'm wrong and it's impossible, but the name I recall and recalled at the time thinking, oh, that's odd, was
name redacted.
And did you know who that was?
Vaguely.
Well, I think I figured out who that is. And stay tuned for the end, because I'm going to save that for the end of the video, and I'll go through and piece together what I think happened and who I think this person is. And you may be wondering, what are you talking about? Well, you're gonna have to stick around to find out exactly. But first, let's start with a clip of this new whistleblower coming out for the very first time, and I've got a lot of different clips to show, so stay with me, y'all. This is going to be actually quite an exciting video. Now, before we start, please hit that like button, Vetters. That helps out the videos a lot, and especially for this one, y'all. I worked really hard on this. It took me a long time. So, and if you're not already, hit that subscribe button. Put out new videos every week about the UFO phenomena. Let's go. Roll clip number one.
You've worked in secret programs. You've got clearances. You've made oaths that you would keep secrets. Let's talk about secrecy and the UAP topic. Shouldn't it be secret to some degree? I mean, we have, there's a race for the technology to try to understand it. We have adversary nations who'd love to get it ahead of us. Why not keep this stuff secret?
Well, if it was just technology that we are worried about protecting and maintaining a military advantage, there's strong arguments to be made and have successfully been made for decades in this country that the American leadership and American people seem to be finding acceptable to be left in the dark about, where science, technology, and their military is taking them. This isn't just technology. This isn't something somebody came up with in a lab and it's sensitive because once the cat's out of the bag, anybody can do it. Fundamentally, this comes from and is secondary to what we've been told is the biggest question, which is humanity alone? The answer is no. And the secrecy that has been defended is at the cost of, in my mind, human dignity, freedom, and progress. And it is no longer permissible or acceptable in my mind to continue this course, to deprive another generation of not just Americans, but humanity of their birthright to know who they are, where they came from, and what's with us.
Now, we're going to be hearing a lot about Immaculate Constellation, right? So let's kind of start with just explaining what exactly that means. What is this? Is it a program? Is it a document? Is it a place? Is it a thing? What does that mean when someone says Immaculate Constellation? What is it?
It looks like the pattern is that under this Immaculate Constellation, they're gathering UAP images from all over the place.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the core of it, right?
Right.
Is the idea that we collect data on these UAP, and someone needs to bring them, collate them together to provide intel to who needs it. And we're assuming or not assuming, it's been pretty laid out, the Immaculate Constellation was a kind of place to bring everything together to provide those briefings to senior leadership. Is that correct?
I don't know about to provide briefings, but definitely to collect data from the military intelligence enterprise specifically, and the sensors associated with that. And yes, to collect that data, centralize it, and have it there for presumably both analysis and, operational needs.
All right, now that we've established what exactly Immaculate Constellation is, let's talk about how Matthew came upon this revelation, right? These documents. How did he even find out about this?
So because you're a workaholic and you're curious and you read a lot, you come across a file that really is what leads us to being here today. It's the Schreiber file.
Yeah, so it was labeled 2018 Schreiber War Game. Might have been brief or something else, but that's it. There's nothing about that screams, it's a very interesting thing. In fact, usually a lot of war game briefs are pretty boring. So there's nothing that stood out about it.
Accidental exposure for you.
100%.
So he basically stumbles upon this, kind of working late at night, and sees this thing, Schreiber, war game file, clicks it open, because he had already been clicking open other things and kind of just taking a look and poking around, right? And then what happens?
You go into it, and what do you see?
There's just a generic title slide. There's a banner without classification markings that just says Immaculate Constellation. And it has a placeholder slide that shows like the Schreiber Air Base logo and some logos of the units involved. But at that time, I believe it would have still been like Air Force Space Command adjacent. So still nothing particularly stunning. I think the name at the top, probably just the name of the exercise. So the next slide, though, is where it gets interesting. Because the face of Lou Elizondo is on that next slide, and I was not who I was expecting to see, and it was accompanied by text to summarize. And please have some grace with me. It's been 7 years, but it was saying that Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program established after the exposure of ATIP in 2017 by former USDI officer Lou Elizondo.
So let me make this clear, what I think Matthew just stated there, right, which is a very important point right here, is that essentially Immaculate Constellation is a special access program that was started because Luis Elizondo came out and shared those videos, right, famously in the New York Times article in 2017. So Immaculate Constellation is in response to that, right, which is kind of interesting. There'll be more to pull on that as we push through this video. So let's move on to the next clip.
So the next slide, the third slide about, just jumps straight into the mission of this app and showing what apparently the results of that mission are. And it's a collection incident in the Pacific Ocean. The subject of collection is several Russian naval intelligence vessels in the middle of the ocean at night. And above those vessels is a large black triangle floating in the air. This is a still image, but it is color.
Now, this is where it gets even more interesting, because in this video, this is where Matthew really details one particular incident that he saw in this Immaculate Constellation, right? Which essentially, it's just, I wouldn't call it a document, I'd call it a slide deck, right? Like one of those PowerPoint presentations. That's what I imagine. Just this slide, then this slide, and then this slide. And he purports there's about 12 of them, essentially, right? So he gets to, the third one essentially here, and boom, he's hearing about this story, which he's going to break down even further here. So stay with me. But he says he sees a full color image, right? And here's kind of an artist's rendition of, allegedly kind of what they saw. Now, this is not the image. This is not the photo, right? Someone sent me this and said, hey, look at this. It's kind of cool. So this kind of helps you, mentally put together what exactly he saw, right? But let's hear a little bit more from Matthew about some of the details of this particular incident, because It's kind of mind-blowing. Of course, if true.
This is a pretty interesting image here.
It is. And then the text that accompanies it describes the incident.
And what can you tell us about it?
The summary of that is just how it unfolded. I should actually back up and say the image itself was unique. This isn't by a plane or a satellite. It looks to be a image pretty close to the waterline. So something that to me read is we have a clandestine submersible asset close by this fleet, and it's taking pictures, trying to stay unnoticed. And so, yes, in the description, it basically lays out what occurred that night, which was that our collection assets were there in area monitoring Russian naval vessels. Not sure what they're doing there, but they've been hanging out in the middle of the ocean in this place, apparently for a few days. Keep an eye on them. And this night, while they are observing the Russian vessels, a large black triangle materializes or decloaks or something. The point is it did not move. It appeared directly above these ships, probably no more than 200 meters, pretty close. And interestingly, as noted in the report itself, there was no visible reaction from these vessels from what would almost certainly be considered a hostile approach.
What do you take away from that? They didn't notice it, or they're not upset about it, or they don't know what to do with it, or what?
So the implication also in the text describing it was, the analysis in the text was that the Russian Navy had foreknowledge that this vehicle would appear in that area of the ocean, and they were there specifically to either collect on it themselves or to interact with it in some way.
Any indication that it might be theirs, that they knew it's going to be there because they control it?
Not in that document. And I haven't seen anything to make me think that they controlled that particular craft, but didn't see anything to the contrary either.
I guess it could be that they've seen it before, that there's nothing they can do about it, so don't get excited about it.
Might be, although it is interesting, if it's something that's part of their environment, as it were, why are they making an effort to be in this space at this time to collect on something they already know about?
Is it like in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, it's off the coast of Kamchatka, as I recall, in the Pacific Ocean.
That's what struck me. I mean, my mind goes to the idea that they were kind of camped out, deep kind of ocean in this one specific area durationally. It kind of implies to me, if I'm thinking outside the box here, there's some form of comms or communication with whoever the operators are of this craft. Am I going too far with that idea? Or?
I think it's a reasonable one to have, but it's not one that I can validate.
This is terrifying if true, right? Because Matthew's about to go even into a little more detail on how they describe this particular vehicle, right? While trying to describe what the mission of Immaculate Constellation is, he gets into how they designated this UFO, right? This triangular UFO, because its designation brings up so many questions. You'll see what I mean. Take a look.
People want to know is what was the mission of Immaculate Constellation as described in the product?
So in the product itself, you had to piece together the mission by reading the whole thing and kind of putting together the parts. It never spelled out fully, like as it should, the mission of the SAP. And I assume that's because this is a type of brief where there will be inserts to the deck, which would be inserted by the SAP control officer during the briefing that would provide another level of detail. But based on the information included in there and its description, the mission becomes apparent, and that is a bare minimum. It's the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission of a global nature for UAPs and RVs, ARVs. The hesitation there is some time has passed. One of those acronyms is in there, either RV or ARV, and that is how the triangle in this case was labeled.
It's been 7 years. So as you're reading through this and that you're remembering RV or ARV just for our audience. So RV is, reverse
reproduction
vehicle.
Yeah.
And the ARV would mean alien, anomalous reproduction.
We see, people in the literature say alien reproduction vehicle. It could just be anomalous
advanced
or advanced. It could be anything that can go after A.
And that's where it gets interesting, right? Because ARV is used in the UFO community as alien reproduction vehicle, right? And here Matthew is stating he's not sure what that means, but that's how it was designated in that photo. So many questions, right? Every time you get answers in this community, it just leads to more questions, right? It's like as soon as you get a key to a room, you unlock it and get in the door, and now there's 10 other doors that you need keys for, and you're like, oh my God, it's just a labyrinth here, right? So this just brings up so many questions, which is fine, but at least we are getting some answers and moving along. Again, it's hard to even know what exactly Matthew saw. He's even confused by it, right? And here's one little part of him explaining exactly that.
You seem crystal clear at times, videos of what appear to be, would you say, non-human intelligence made craft. I mean, what you see evidence that the rest of the world doesn't get to see. Mm-hmm. That starts happening.
Yeah. Nothing in those videos necessarily proves it's extraterrestrial or non-human. It certainly is anomalous, exotic, and unexplainable.
And advanced.
Yes.
Beyond our capabilities that you know of?
I don't know.
All right, now let's get to this juicy part that I sort of briefly teased at the beginning of the video. Remember the name redacted part, that clip, right?
So everyone says that I'm wrong and it's impossible, but the name I recalled at the time thinking, oh, that's odd, was
name redacted.
And did you know who that was?
Vaguely.
Well, let's hear the full clip, and then I'll start to break it down and explain who exactly I think this is.
So it's designated a SAP. You know this is a SAP. It's sitting on a server maybe it shouldn't be on.
Correct.
Right. So I think that's important. And also it seems like it's just a response to the public spillage or exposure that we saw come forward with people like, and specifically Lou Elizondo. This was like an internal classified response to the fact, oh shit, some of this is out now.
Yeah, that's exactly the tone of those words, of that slide. Mm-hmm. That's the implied order of events that led to being established.
So it was like 2018, maybe.
Yeah, the file was at least last accessed in 2018. I can't remember if it did say, the file creation date or if I looked it up, but I know it was last accessed.
And you see who's accessed it prior to you?
I can.
And what did you see?
So everyone says that I'm wrong and it's impossible, but the name I recalled at the time thinking, oh, that's odd, was
name redacted.
And did you know who that was?
Vaguely. At that time, people are considered superstars in leadership circles, so you just hear names like that, and that's what her name was.
Why would that be impossible? Why are people now, in retrospect, why are people telling you that would be impossible?
Oh, she wasn't at the Pentagon then.
Mm-hmm.
Where was she? She was at the Pentagon, to my knowledge, but they're saying she wasn't there.
Right.
So let me just save the suspense here, right? This is exactly who I think he's talking about, Kathleen Hicks. And I'm going to explain why I think that. The Honorable Kathleen H. Hicks served as the 35th Deputy Secretary of Defense from February 9th, 2021 to January 20th, 2025. So stay with me. Hicks takes direct oversight of Pentagon's UAP office, new reporting website to be launched. Right. So in separate discussions over the last week, Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks and a Pentagon spokesperson briefed Defense Scoop on the near-term vision for the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Kathleen Hicks is the United States Deputy Secretary of Defense, oversees the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which investigates unidentified flying objects and other anomalous phenomena. AARO's current director, John T. Kozlowski, reports to Hicks. AARO was established in 2022 and is responsible for investigating UAPs, formerly the focus of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, the UAPTF.
The Department of Defense is launching a new website for U.S. service members to report UAP sightings. The Pentagon describes the site as a one-stop shop for publicly sharing current findings on UAPs, including declassified photos, videos, and other material on sightings and potential threats. News Nation Washington correspondent Joe Khalil was at the briefing today at the Pentagon where officials announced the new initiative. Tell us all about it, Joe.
Yeah, a couple of changes coming, Elizabeth. That one you just mentioned, the website, they're also getting a little bit of a shakeup in terms of their leadership. All of it, the Pentagon says, is meant to make everything more transparent around UFOs and UAPs for the public. But there are still a lot of questions because what they're releasing is the unclassified material. What about the classified material? Why is that still private, and what is that really? Changes coming to the agency within the Pentagon that investigates UFO reports. AARO, or the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, will now answer directly to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks.
It highlights the importance of the program to the department and the fact that it has the Deputy Secretary's full attention.
AARO will soon be publishing a website making publicly available all unclassified UFO reports it has, complete with witness accounts, videos, and pictures, according to Pentagon spokesman General Pat Ryder, a step toward full transparency. In a recent congressional hearing, former Air Force intel officer David Grusch claimed under oath he believes the government is running a secret program to reverse engineer non-human origin UFOs, which it has in its possession. A controversial claim, one Grusch says is based on interviews he has done with dozens of people who work in national defense.
People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program.
We asked the Pentagon whether any of those interviews would be made public or whether any of the people Grusch spoke with would be made available to Congress. Are any of those reports going to be published on this website, those interviews?
As I understand it, AARO is very willing to take any inputs or information and to investigate into claims of UAP. And so if that information is made available to the department, certainly we'll take a look at it.
Now, let me keep breaking it down, right? Because David Grusch mentions Kathleen Hicks, not by name, but by her position in his opening testimony in July of 2023. And once I present all this, don't worry, I'll connect all the dots for you if you haven't figured it out already, because there's more.
In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef.
Right there, he mentions the DepSecDef, which is the Deputy Secretary of Defense, who at the time was Kathleen Hicks, right? And she's directly involved with AARO, right? And only came to the Pentagon from 2021 to 2025, right? But she was involved, if you look more, she was involved in the Pentagon, but not in an official capacity. So when Matthew Brown states that she, remember, he states that the name redacted person is a she, says they weren't supposed to be at the Pentagon, right? Well, Kathleen was around during that time, right? And she was the one who would be directly involved with this program and Immaculate Constellation. So it makes sense that she would access this particular file, right? And because it has so much to do with the misappropriation of funds, which we're about to get into, right? And Kathleen is directly responsible for that as well, because that was a big part of David Grusch's investigation, right? That secretly we've been paying for these programs and we can't even take care of our own funds, right? In the government, we can't even pass an audit, right? So in my opinion, that's who this was. This was Kathleen Hicks, who is directly involved here. Her direct connection to UFOs, the timing all fits, right, as far as this goes. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what other people have to say, but I have even more things to show, because during this interview with Matthew, he also states that mentioning certain people's names, right, at his job during that time was like radioactive, right? If you brought up certain people's names. And guess whose name was the most radioactive? You guessed it, David Grusch.
So what do you mean if you mention certain whistleblowers? Who?
David Grusch.
You can't mention David Grusch in certain professional settings or you are fucked.
Yeah, if you're not fired, you are in for a very rough time, is my understanding.
Elizondo?
You know, I didn't hear Elizondo as a no-go word.
Saying David Grusch testified in open Congress, so that makes sense. So what have you seen it happen? Have you seen people like mention his name? How do you become aware you can't even talk about him?
So that specific example, heard from a friend at that agency, that was essentially the word of mouth from management. Nothing written in paper, nothing in emails. Mm-hmm. But from what it sounds like, people got a conversation with their leadership and were told as much as we've just gone over. And his name was absolutely, in the first-hand experience, sort of radioactive in the chat rooms. It would either, all of a sudden, these people that never participate are there really slamming him and slamming the people talking about him.
On the classified internet.
Indeed. Now let's continue, right? That makes sense that David Grusch, because he was the one pushing behind the scenes, who worked for the UAP task force, then went to Arrow, right? Who investigated this, but part of his investigation about UFOs was the misappropriation of funds, right? To hide these programs, right? Because this is no secret that that's what happens, regardless if you believe in UFOs or not. You know, our government misspends money and can't tell us where most of it goes, right? Which becomes very easy to hide this. And if David Grusch is going to come out and kind of make, waves about that, it makes sense that his name would then become, person non grata, right? Do not mention this guy, because he's uncovering what we're doing, right? So it makes sense that it would be Kathleen Hicks, the one that put the kibosh on bringing up David Grusch's name, and was the one who was accessing Immaculate Constellation, because she was part of running these UAP programs, right? Totally makes sense. Now, here's more evidence that the government does misspend funds. It's not a secret. Again, here's Tim Burchett, who's heavily involved in UFOs, talking about this exact thing on News Nation last year.
There are two provisions that were deleted from the defense spending bill regarding this requirement to make any information regarding alien spacecraft or alien remains, which might be the most shocking claim, public. And Grusch, who we heard from in that Elizabeth Vargas interview, is calling it the greatest failure, the greatest legislative failure in American history. Do you believe that is true?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know about the greatest so far. I would say by the end of the week we might surpass that. But yeah, I had a simple amendment, basically on one of the reauthorization bills that just said, if a commercial airline pilot spots an anomaly, a UFO or what have you, and makes that report to the FAA, that it would be they'd have to make that report to Congress. Yet I was told the amendment was not even considered, and they said it was because the intelligence community didn't like it, not the committee. Talking about unelected bureaucrats at the Pentagon, and you got to realize the Pentagon has not passed an audit the last 6 times in the history of auditing the Pentagon. Over 1/2 of their assets are unaccounted for, ma'am, and these are the people we trust with our billion, and we rewarded them with, I think, $40 billion new dollars for their mishandling of our tax dollars. This is what's going on, ma'am. The inmates are running the asylum, and we've got to put a stop to this.
It's about broader transparency for you and those of you who are outraged by some of these responses or non-responses, especially from the Defense Department, as you mentioned, not able to tell us exactly where all this money went.
To keep this thread going about the misappropriation of funds, to show you that it doesn't necessarily have to do with UFOs and how directly involved Kathleen Hicks was with audits, the misappropriation of funds. What's the Pentagon doing with all of this money, right? Here is comedian Jon Stewart talking to Kathleen Hicks in quite an interesting conversation about the misuse of money by the American government. This clip went viral. You may or may not remember it. Take a look.
There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse within a system.
Audits and waste, fraud, and abuse are not the same thing. So let's decompose these pieces.
Then please educate me on
sure.
What
so an audit is
difference.
Exactly what you just described,
yes.
Which is, do I know what was delivered to which place?
Right.
The ability to pass an audit or the fact that the DOD has not passed an audit is not suggestive of waste, fraud, and abuse. That is completely false right there. So
what is
now
it
it's a question of, it's suggestive that we don't have an accurate inventory that we can pull up of what we have where. That is not the same as saying we can't do that because waste, fraud, and abuse has occurred.
So in my world,
yeah,
that's waste.
How is that waste?
If I give you $1 billion and you can't tell me what happened to it, that to me is wasteful. That means you are not responsible. But if you can't tell me where it went, then what am I supposed to think? And when there has been reporting, I mean, this is not, look, I'm not saying this is on you and that you caused this, but I think it's a tough argument to
I'm pretty
make
sure
that
I didn't cause it.
an $850 billion budget to an organization that can't pass an audit and tell you where that money went, like, I think most people would consider that somewhere in the realm of waste, fraud, or abuse, because they would wonder why that money isn't well accounted for. And especially when they see food insecurity on military bases, and they see...
You want to talk about that? Because that's a good... we should be talking... I mean,
well,
I'm trying to understand where you're trying to go, other than the dollars, which really bother you.
I think it doesn't really bother me. I think it's all connected.
Okay.
I think
tell me that story. Tell me how you're thinking about that.
When I see a State Department get a certain amount of money and a military budget be 10 times that, and I see a struggle within government to get people like more basic services, and then that department that got that, I mean, we got out of 20 years of war and the Pentagon got a $50 billion raise. Like, that's shocking to me. Now, I may not understand exactly the ins and outs and the incredible magic of an audit, but I'm a human being who lives on the earth and can't figure out how $850 billion to a department means that the rank and file still have to be on food stamps. Like, to me, that's fucking corruption. I'm sorry. And if that blows your mind, and if you think like that's like a crazy agenda for me to have, I really think that that's institutional thinking, and that it's not looking at the day-to-day reality of the people that you call the greatest fighting force in the world. So I get back to this idea of like, I'm not looking to pick a fight with you, but I am surprised at that the reaction to these questions are, you don't know what an audit is, bucko. Like, that's just weird to me.
Okay.
So yes, I do think that the person that Matthew, the whistleblower, right, featured in today's video, was talking about, that they redacted the name, is Kathleen Hicks, and her direct involvement with UFOs, Arrow, the UAPTF, you know, DepSecDev, like David Grusch spoke about, David Grusch being person non grata at the Pentagon, can't talk about him, right? Misappropriation of funds, all the things David Grusch uncovered, Kathleen Hicks was directly responsible for. And you can see her response to Jon Stewart talking about it. She thinks it's kind of a joke and kind of making Jon Stewart seem like he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Definitely. I think Kathleen Hicks is the person they're talking about. Now, what that means and what are the implications, I don't know, right? But something is just up. Something's off. Something's not right, right? Is Arrow really an office, again, the Pentagon's Office to Study UFOs, who, again, Arrow report to Kathleen Hicks. Now, not anymore since she left at the beginning of 2025. There's a new DepSecDef, but at the time, during all of this happening, she was the one that everyone had to report to, right? I definitely think it's her. So anyway, we'll have to wait and see. But look, it gets even more interesting with the Office of Arrow and the former director of Arrow, Sean Kirkpatrick, because at the end of this Weaponized podcast with Matthew, this was just part one. They previewed part two of what's coming up. And when you hear this, it's not good. Take a look.
On the next episode of Weaponized.
When I was in USDI, I read the transcripts of Sean Kirkpatrick briefing Senator Rubio, Senator Warren, and Senator Gillibrand on the results of his investigation in his congressionally tasked Arrow report. You know, I read these transcripts once and immediately knew that
Veiled threat?
No, I knew that I was now something else. I was I had inside knowledge into the deception of our government by elements of our intelligence community. My blood ran cold at a specific point in that transcript where Mr. Rubio is discussing the legacy program. This was a subject of direct discussion with Sean Kirkpatrick in these meetings. And based on Mr. Kirkpatrick's replies about as vague as they were, but unable to escape the truth of the legacy program, Mr. Rubio's response was, well, what the hell is the executive branch doing? Have they been running this for 60 years without congressional oversight? The process of Grusch coming forward left a wake on the inside too. People were tracking that, weren't even involved, but were able to see sort of the distortions on the inside.
Distortions of truth.
Exactly, but also, bureaucracies and offices behaving weirdly. That was one of the moments that really started to convince me that this was not under our government's control.
If this is true, and if what Matthew read was what he's thinking it is, this is terrifying, right? It's almost like you kind of think that, but to see actual proof of it would be astonishing and leave you speechless, right? So I don't know what's going on. But one thing that's kind of interesting, Sean Kirkpatrick directly responded to this after this came out, and this is what he had to say. That's the biggest bunch of bullshit I've heard today. Either he's illiterate or he's lying to gain fame. Either way, that's not true. So Sean Kirkpatrick is refuting those allegations that, of what Matthew Brown said. So what do you think, y'all? Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, these are my thoughts, opinions, speculations, all allegedly, right? Until we have confirmation from Matthew who exactly he was talking about that had access to Immaculate Constellation before him, right? Who was the last to access it? I don't know, but my best guess is Kathleen Hicks. Like I said, this was a fascinating podcast. There's so much more that I didn't include, so I'm going to put a link in the description. I highly recommend going to check out Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's Part 1 with whistleblower Matthew Brown, again, behind the Immaculate Constellation documents, and see it for yourself, because there's so much more in there to discuss, right? So anyway, hope you enjoyed today's video. I worked really hard on this video, y'all. Definitely way more than I do on a typical daily video, which is why it took me so long to get it out after the video premiered yesterday, but I think it was well worth it. So this, to me, is a great breakdown of the entire thing. Share it, get it out there. Help me out, betters. That would really help out. So share this video if you've stuck around this long, right? So anyway, all right, y'all. We'll see you on the next one. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.